Hello, everyone. Welcome to Academic Misfits. I'm here today with somebody who I met on a Facebook group. I'm all about community right now because with the election in the U.S., you'll probably hear this after it. Still reeling, and I think one of the things that we've decided as a community of women that I'm a member of many different women communities is that we need more of this networking, more collective power, more collective action. And so I'm really excited to talk to somebody today about this, which I'll tell you about in a second. But as I was inviting her to be on the podcast, an article came out in the LSE about what makes the child penalty in academia different. And this is research that's come out of Denmark. But I think it's probably applicable and probably a little bit worse in other places because Denmark has a very good, kind of maternity leave, parental leave benefits for parents and also childcare. When I had my child in Sweden, obviously I had a lot of time off to be able to take care of my child and with 90% pay, which was amazing. And I was so thankful and felt so privileged that I had a child in Sweden rather than in the US because, I never would have been able to survive, I don't think. But this article talked about, obviously we know about the leaky pipeline. We know that, oftentimes in different subjects in psychology, for example, and probably a lot of social sciences, we know that women are graduating more with bachelor's degrees, with master's degrees, with PhDs. But then what we have is a disproportionate number of men at the top levels, at senior levels. So what they said is on average, there's one woman for every 4 or 5 men at a senior level in university. And this was in economics departments. But it's true. And even when I was in Sweden, there were more male professors than there were female professors. And we also know that there's a child penalty on top of that. So in this article, they showed that it takes about 5 years after a woman's had a baby to kind of recoup her career and to achieve tenure or whatever the permanent role is after you get your PhD, whatever those options are for you. But it wasn't any better in research institutes. Women oftentimes after having a baby would leave their profession. So there is a lot of change that needs to happen. So today I'm talking to Christie Margrave, who's a lecturer in languages in French, and she's going to be talking to us today about the added difficulty. Let me get you on the podcast. Welcome, Christie.
Hi, Luna. It's nice to talk to you again.
I know. I'm so excited to do this podcast with you because I think when we talk about academic misfits, just being simply a woman seems to be an academic misfit. And then you add to that all the different intricacies and intersectionalities. And we see the effects of that. So yes, tell people who you are and what you're here to talk about and what you're doing right now.
So I'm a lecturer in French at Cardiff University in Wales. I've been here since January of this year. Prior to that, I was a couple of years at University of East Anglia, and before that, a couple of years at the Australian National University in Canberra, which is where my son was born.
Oh, wow.
I am a single mom or solo mom by choice, and I decided to pursue that route for medical reasons. But anyway, I decided to pursue that route while I was living out in Australia, working on a temporary contract, and then the pandemic hit, and I found myself in a position where I was on maternity leave and my contract wasn't going to be renewed. So I was also in a slightly awkward, very awkward, in fact, position in that, in sort of personal terms, in that because I was 10,000 miles away from home when all the borders were closed, I had no family with me, and my son was born premature and was in the NICU. So I fought for an emergency passport for him to get him all the way back to the UK, and then I got locked down in the UK, couldn't make it back to Australia. So now here I am. I'm back again in the UK. Reading that article about the 5 year, it takes a woman on average 5 years post giving birth to kind of get back up to the level she was at before and start to, carry on the pathway that she thought she was on originally. It rings so many bells for me. My son is 4 now. And, during the last 4 years, obviously, we've had the pandemic. I've had 2 job changes, 3 house moves, and, have been holding down a full-time academic role whilst solo parenting a child miles away from where any of my family live. And any parent knows that the second you put a kid into a nursery or to school, they come home with viruses, a different virus every week, like a little gift bag. You hand over the vast 95% of your salary, and what you get back is, sand and viruses and occasionally a piece of cute art to put on the fridge.
And knits, right?
Gosh, yeah. Well, we haven't had that yet. Touch wood.
I don't mean to make it sound worse. Sorry.
Well, there's always something, though, isn't there? Definitely. And so, yeah, I've been very, very lucky in the institutions that I've worked in that I've had very supportive colleagues. So colleagues as individuals have been amazing, and without that, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do. I think, as a whole, across the whole world, and I think we're seeing that in sort of recent political events, though, it's very difficult for many academics to make their voices heard. There does seem to be, I know they were talking about this, sort of even eight years ago in 2016, but this, don't listen to the experts sort of thing. It does become increasingly difficult to make your voice heard as an academic in the modern world. And as somebody who is twice marginalized, once as a mother, once as a woman, once as a solo mother, I can't even begin to imagine how it must be for those who are 3 or 4 times marginalized. I have friends who are solo mothers who have a disability or who are women of color, and I feel like a misfit because the system isn't supportive enough for my situation. And I can see very, very clearly how easy it is for even well-meaning institutions to overlook simple things that cause sometimes a great deal of harm. Certainly to a person. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, a lot of these issues then come up, like your issue specifically came up, the problem with you not being supported in academia during that time was during your early career phase, which is where, it is kind of like making an airplane take off, because when you're early career, you've got loads of things to think about. Like, have I published the things from my PhD? At least I didn't publish during my PhD. I know that's quite privileged. It was the time then. But you're having to make up all of that. You're having to, hit all the boxes so that your teaching is hitting certain boxes, your research is hitting certain boxes. What leadership positions should I be taking on? What students can I be taking on? And at the same time, when you have a child, it then means like everything, you're not supported in any way. And in some ways it's like a burden. I don't know if that's the way that you felt, but I remember telling my postdoc supervisors, and I did not get an impression that they were very happy.
I think in many ways, I mean, I've recently taken on the role of Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in the school that I work in. And I'm discovering more and more, as I say, how easy it is to overlook simple things that end up making what should be something that, doesn't interfere with your work at all and has, frankly, very little to do with your work, suddenly a big issue. And the expectations, a lot of the expectations around the amount of free hours that you can put in, expectations around how much you can publish and contribute. And I know that there is a phrase, relative to opportunity, but when I see universities cutting departments or making massive compulsory redundancies, I wonder to what extent equality, diversity, and inclusion is feeding into those decisions.
Yeah.
When it comes down purely to numbers, and to statistics and to an ability to make up a financial deficit, at what point are people who can't continue working after 5 p.m. or on a weekend automatically suffering?
Yeah, and a lot of our equality diversity meetings were after 5 p.m. because it was like, well, it's not part of our, regular work that we're committed to. It's an extra, it's kind of a bonus. So we'll put that on, we'll tack it on at the end. Or when decisions are made after 5 p.m. or in the pub or whatever, and you're like,
Conferences, the number of conferences, I mean,
yeah.
I can only go to conferences because my mum comes with me to watch my little boy. But she's, unfortunately, she recently broke her leg in 3 places. So she's not physically capable of kind of running around after him. And so watching him for more than an hour or two is not really, a strong possibility at the moment. And it means that I can't go to any networking events, the things like AGMs or lunches, or, there have even been instances at conferences where I've, if they've lasted more than 1 day and I've applied for conference accommodation, or I've not been allowed to stay in conference accommodation because I've been breastfeeding and I needed to bring a child with me, and children were not permitted on campus. So, there are things that being a solo mom and not having another, another adult in the vicinity to do regular casual childcare, there are things that I just can't do anymore. And yeah, I'm surprised that barrier of that 5-year kind of gap isn't longer, actually.
Yeah.
I've spoken to other mothers who, even those who have partners, who say, since becoming a mother, I haven't attended a conference. And as I say, there are lots that I'd like to go to that I can't. A lot of the conferences that I've approached, or the societies organising conferences that I've approached, have been very helpful and have said, oh, well, we'll allow you to present online, or we'll allow you even to attend the entire thing online. And that's been really, really helpful. But still, you don't get that same ability to network as you would if you were there in person.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, we don't. You're bringing up like a really important point, which is like, some parents have maybe their partner leave for a little while on a conference themselves, or they work outside, in another country, so they're gone for a few months, so they're single moms, but in that respect, in that context. But there's a difference when you're a single mom and you're like living in another country, like I've experienced. But then there's a different thing where you don't have a partner and your mom's now like having to be your partner in some ways to go with you to these conferences, or to be there for times that you need somebody to take care of your child. But when you're a single mom by choice and you don't have a partner with you, it's even more difficult. Like I'm really like realizing how much more difficult that is.
It is. And I mean, sometimes people say to me, what's the difference between a single mom and a solo mom? And on the basis, not a lot. Sort of in regular everyday terms, there really isn't very much of a difference. But I guess the way I see it is that sometimes, not all the time, but a substantial part of the time, if you've been with a partner, had a child and split up, then in many occasions there is the possibility of co-parenting. And so getting a bit of time back to dedicate towards work whilst the other parent, is taking care of the child. Or you have 2 sets of grandparents who want to be involved. I've even got friends who perhaps don't see their partner anymore, but the partner's parents still want to be involved with their grandchild. So it's a solo mom doesn't have any of that. And my parents are absolutely great. I wouldn't be able to do half, even a quarter of what I do without my parents. But they're getting older, and as I say, my mum's recently had an accident and broken her leg. My dad has severe arthritis, so there's a limit to the amount that I want to put on them, in order for me to be able to be at the same career stage that I was, say, 5 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way that academia was kind of created, a lot of people that are getting ahead are the people that are, are the a lot of times men who are saying, well, I've got somebody who takes care of the children a lot of the times. And do you know what I mean? There is that kind of, if you have that kind of privilege, it
Yeah, I
makes it a
think
lot easier.
there's also a blinker sometimes. I've spoken to a few people who have said, so one of the things you said when you were opening there was, we still don't see enough women in senior roles. There's almost a blinker though. When we get women into senior roles, we think, right, okay, we've made the progress we need to, and I think, well, actually, that's only part of the progress. How many of those women in senior roles are solo mums? Single mothers. How many of the men in senior roles are single fathers? Or are solo fathers, who don't have, the child's mother involved in the childcare somewhere. I'd really like to see a solo parent in a senior role, male or female. Because I think that would start to break down a few gender barriers too.
Yeah.
Not, sort of EDI awareness of not holding events after 5 in the evening. Even graduations. We had our graduation I couldn't go to because it was at 5:30. My students were like, "Are you coming to our graduation?" I was like, "I can't. I'm so sorry. I've got no childcare." And you really don't want a 3-year-old running around, your graduation ceremony. So yeah, I mean, I think seeing women in high-powered leadership roles is a great start. And yes, I want to see more of it, but it's not the be all and end all. There is a lot that goes on beneath the surface. And we need to sort of start to think about that scaffolding that helps those women get up there. And is it the same scaffolding that is needed for, say, a woman of color to get into a senior role, or a solo mom to get into a senior role, or a woman with a disability to get into a senior role, or a woman with a caring responsibility for somebody with a disability to get into a senior role? I'd like to see some of that happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you said that you've been, because it sounds like you're kind of the person to do that a little bit with your senior role, with your equality diversity hat on, with your Athena Swan hat on. What kinds of things have you been looking at improving, or what kind of things have helped you that you think could help other people, or how have you kind of poked at academia to change?
I'm continuing to poke. I've only been in this role since August. So one of the things that I've just finished is creating a list of guidelines. So it's a brochure kind of guide for supervisors of postgraduates in research. And it puts together, sort of various bits of factual information around discrimination, unconscious bias, microaggression, microinvalidation, that sort of thing. And it also kind of gives sort of handy hints of things to think through when you might be supervising somebody who's in a very different situation than what you might have encountered before. So, for example, do you have a student for whom it would be unacceptable or unsuitable to hold a supervision on a Friday? Are we thinking about religious exclusion in that particular context? Is it possible, is it feasible for a student to make the university's kind of limits on percentage time that they should be in in-person supervisions if they're in a carer role, either for a child or for an older person, or for somebody with a disability? So that's one thing that I've been sort of very, very proud of being able to do. I've also been attending, obviously, lots of training sessions and having lots of discussions. One thing that came out of a training session I went to this week, actually, was from a woman in a senior leadership role, a very senior leadership role. And she was saying, you might not always have the power to change things, but you've always got the power to nudge. So like you were saying, like I keep poking and pressing buttons and saying, well, hang on a second, have you thought about? And it probably gets a bit wearing for people after a while, but I want to see, and I'm very, very passionate about equality, diversity, and inclusion, and I want to see more inclusion. And at least I think one of the things that has happened for me in the last 5 years is that I'm less afraid to push those buttons now than I was sort of when I was first coming off the back of my PhD.
Is that because you have a little bit more stability in your current role, or like what prompted you?
Possibly,
Or did you just get too mad?
To what extent any of us have stability in arts and humanities at the moment in higher education is questionable. But yes, I think part of it does come from that. I mean, it's very, very difficult to push those buttons when you're on a temporary contract, or when you're right at the very bottom of the ladder. So yeah, I think part of it certainly comes from that. Part of it also comes from the fact that I'm a different person to who I was before I had a child. That is a very cliched thing to say. I'm well aware of it, but I've in sort of non-work terms, outside of work, in personal terms, I've been dealing with a lot of legal battles, and it's shaped certainly the bigger picture, I think, for me. And I've seen just again another personal, for instance, applying for a visa for me and my son to travel. It's sometimes there are countries where it's very difficult to apply for that visa without a letter of permission from a second parent. And for a solo parent, a solo mum or a solo dad, there is no second parent.
Oh my God.
And there's nothing I can do about that, right? So I've had to, contact immigration lawyers. I've had to push those buttons with departments of Home Affairs or whatever, and say, look, you really, really, really need to reshape some of these policies to make them fit the modern world.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I don't think conferences think about that enough and consider where they're having them.
Which is great, because that's something that I've definitely found in the EDI role, is that when I mention these things to conference organizers, they do kind of think, oh, okay, if there's a way we can make that work, we'll try. It's not, I guess, we're still living in a world in which it's not always possible, and that's, very often the pushback does come, no, you'll hit a brick wall somewhere. Can I use my research funding for childcare costs so that I can go to this networking event? No. Okay. Where do I go from that? It's a policy decision. I'm just going to have to keep chipping away at people who are, a lot more senior to me, higher up on the pay scale, until we can make those changes. But some things that you can make a difference over with conferences, for example, is the breastfeeding issue. You can message, and I did message the conference organisers, who were absolutely wonderful about the whole thing, and said, we're very sorry about this policy. Obviously, it's not the fault of the conference organisers themselves, and they wished that they had known about it beforehand, and put everything in place, including a nice inclusion kind of email to all of the attendees. To let them know of all the different groups of people who would be attending, and what their needs might be. If there is a person who is attending the conference with a guide dog, not everybody in society is aware of the ways in which people can and can't and shouldn't, in many cases, approach somebody's guide dog. So, it's useful, I think, for conferences to be able to give those bits of information to attendees. And it's really nice, I think, to be the person that kind of presses those buttons and says, have you thought about sending out an email to to anybody who's coming to this conference to deal with these things. One thing I'd really like to see more of is childcare at conferences. I've attended one conference where they provided childcare. They didn't pay for it. The attendees that were using the childcare paid for it. I think it cost us £50 for the whole day. All it cost the organizer was the price of a phone call to a local childcare provider who came in on a Saturday and quite happily accepted all the £50 from all of the many parents who wanted to bring their small children with them, and they provided on-site childcare a couple of doors down from where the panels were taking place, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was one of the best experiences I've had in terms of conference. And all it takes is a quick phone call. It's not that difficult.
Was that in the UK or where was that?
It was in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah. It was actually the Donor Conception Network conference. So I think they knew that the vast majority of their attendees were going to need childcare, and so wanted to be able to provide it.
That's
but
amazing.
If this kind of thing was provided on a regular basis at conferences, and most of us would rather go to the conference and pay for the childcare ourselves than not have those networking opportunities that will then enable us to put together publications or grant proposals as a group, or eventually get promotion, that sort of thing. I'd rather pay for that childcare than not go. And I think a lot of us would feel the same.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I didn't go to a conference for almost a year after I had my child because I was breastfeeding and I wanted it at least to last a year that we were doing breastfeeding for, and nobody talks about that. And I was like, how do I do this? Where do I express milk? Do I save it? Do I throw it away? How do I get in the mood to breastfeed? Because you actually have to get in the mood. I didn't know this.
There's so much we don't talk about, isn't there? I mean, when you're desperate to have a baby, there are so many things people don't tell you.
And then I was, expressing milk in the office because there was nowhere to go except for maybe the toilets. And, luckily my work colleague that I was sharing an office with was like, I've seen it all. I'm from Mauritius. Like, it's fine. I mean, maybe if she was like British, she would have been like, no, that's improper. But she was like, nah, I've seen it. It's fine. And I was like, okay, this is weird, but I'm going to close the door now. And you can't have a student come and, do you know what I mean? And have a student meeting because I'm
This is the thing, right? I've always been very open about, my son doesn't breastfeed anymore, but for the couple of years, 3 years, in fact, that he did, I was very
congratulations
open about doing it. Thank you. Certainly at the beginning, anyway. If when he was exclusively breastfeeding, when he was a tiny baby, if he got hungry when I was out for a walk, I just found a bench, sat down. Sometimes didn't even find a bench. I'd be walking and breastfeeding at the same time, and I was sort of very kind of, if anybody's got a problem with it, whatever, they can just go away. I know that there are many people that I've met, friends, family, colleagues, who don't feel that comfortable and who do feel pressured. If somebody is staring at them, or somebody feels uncomfortable and gets up and walks away, and I can understand why they would, and I think it's not acceptable for say cafes, restaurants, or whatever, when you're asking for a breastfeeding space, to say, go do it in the toilet. It's a very unhygienic space to be breastfeeding, and
I would never. I mean, obviously, or not obviously, but when I was in Sweden and breastfeeding in public, it was really not a big a deal, nobody really said anything, which was nice. In the UK, I mean, it didn't seem like that different in terms of, people coming up to me, but that might have been that I was in a kind of university town, and so, quite liberal, but it was just at work. And although while I was there, they were like, oh, maybe we should have a space for Luna to be able to do this, maybe. And so it took them a long time, but they did find, here's a room and we'll put it up for you and get it all set up for you. But I think it is, they encounter these things and go, huh, I never thought, or people haven't asked for it. So it's good that you and other people are making them aware that this is a thing that is, a
Very
barrier.
often, I've only really learned what is useful by talking one-on-one with other friends and colleagues. It's not one place that I worked, the place where I was prior to coming here, had breastfeeding rooms. They had signs up pointing women to breastfeeding rooms. They even had, so we had to share an office, but they gave, they put four of us together who were breastfeeding within the same office, and we had a room within a room. Like they built with, I don't know, sort of like MDF or something, like a room within a room, so that we could go in there and express without, disturbing anybody else that needed to meet with a student, for instance. And that was wonderful. That's one of the best
With a little fridge.
Yes, yeah, with the mini fridge, yeah, exactly. And we'd put little post-its on the wall or the door or whatever, like so and so, don't forget to take your milk home with you or something. Just because we knew that we were, baby brain, we knew that we would get things like that. And
you told,
it was a very supportive atmosphere to be working in. It was wonderful.
That's amazing. But I remember when we were talking earlier that you told me about Meryl Streep, because I didn't know about the story.
Yeah, well, what you were saying about having to get in the mood for breastfeeding, right? But there are times when it happens the opposite way around. Like you hear somebody else's baby cry, and then you're like, okay, why didn't I put breast pads on today? And I remembered reading that. No, I think she was I forget who was interviewing Meryl Streep, but she was saying that she remembered going to an awards ceremony for Kramer versus Kramer, and she just not that long ago had her child and was breastfeeding, and this awards ceremony went on and on and on and on, and it sort of got closer and closer to, I don't know, lunchtime or dinner time or whatever it was, and she's like, if I don't get out of here soon, like I'm going to be leaking right through. And she did, because it had gone on such a long time. She leaked through this white dress that she was wearing, and had to go up and collect her award kind of like this, with her arms over her breasts, so nobody could tell that the dress was stained with breast milk. I wish more women would speak openly about, maybe not about those kind of experiences. I mean, obviously I'm not anticipating or expecting that people speak about experiences when it makes them uncomfortable, but for those who don't mind speaking about those experiences, it really helps the rest of us to know what is normal, and that we are not alone, and that it is okay to ask if, hang on a second, this meeting's gone on a little bit too long and I'm just going to skedaddle for a minute, because if I don't, it's going to get embarrassing for quite a few people here. Perimenopause is another thing I've been chatting with female colleagues about. And I mean, two separate issues here. Firstly, it's very difficult to look after a small child and hold down a full-time job while you're going through the perimenopause. But secondly, similarly with the breastfeeding and the unintentional lactation kind of instances, there are many women, myself included, who have bled through clothes at work before. And again, it can get very, very uncomfortable. And, in the middle of teaching a lecture, I've once or twice had to run in the middle of a lecture. Yeah. And nobody talks about anything like this, so that it's very rare that you'll get things like free sanitary products in women's bathrooms. Universities don't have any money, but we had a great staff student coordinator, or staff student rep over the last few years here at Cardiff, and she fought and fought and fought, and it took a long time, but she did manage to get free period products put in into the bathrooms within this particular school, and it's only through having those conversations with people that stuff like that happens, and I just like to see more of it. Yeah. So hence why I'm talking to you now, really. It's like it's important that we do talk about these issues, because otherwise, people continue to suffer, don't they?
Yeah. And that's why, I had an idea for a podcast. And then I was like, I love that we can talk about things that actually help. Do you know what I mean? I don't want this to be like a whinge fest or something like that. And I'm not
Yeah, of course.
against, academia as the concept, right? I enjoy research.
I
I
love
enjoy
my job.
teaching. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do a different job. I really enjoy doing what I do. And it's the same. Well, the women for the Paris Olympics this year, clearly they are passionate about what they do and put in millions of hours of effort and struggle and all the rest of it. But what Alison Felix did with making it sort of kid friendly for women with small children to be able to attend, it's wonderful. And I remember putting up tweets at the time saying, like, now that the Olympics have done it, can academia please do it too? I don't want to be the person that everybody kind of eye rolls at and say, oh, she's coming at us with this equality, diversity, and inclusion stuff again. But you can see how well it works in situations when people get it working.
Yeah.
And as a whole, on the whole rather, academics are very inclusionary and very caring, and very, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, very liberal, and very eager to have discussions. And so it kind of surprises me that there are still a lot of ways to pave.
Yeah. And still more people going, yeah, we should have more discussions about that. It's like, okay, I guess that's one of the things about academics. Sometimes it's like getting from the discussion phase to the implementation.
I think this has become my motto in the last like 3 or 4 months, but translating awareness into action.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
It's every training session I go to, we're all very able to answer the questions: what is direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, micro invalidation, and so on and so forth. We're very aware, but we're not very active.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love translating awareness into action. Is that what you said? I need a t-shirt now.
I think that's what they're going to put on my tombstone.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you have like, that's like your goal. And when you have something that's solitary that you keep going and poking and going, what button can I push? And I'm doing a session next year for a university on how to influence and negotiate within academia when you're a person of color.
Yes.
And I'm so excited to do that because everything I've heard you talk about is about navigating structures. It's not just about, do I have good influencing skills, but it's like, do I know the structures? Who knows the structures that can help me with those, barriers that I'm hitting? If I meet somebody who's like a very senior leader, what can they do to enable me to make these changes? What can they share so that I can do it? Or what buttons can they push on my behalf? And I think that's the important part, to just keep doing that, because it does need to change. I mean, obviously and I think talking about perimenopause, I mean, so many people are leaving their jobs, regardless of whether it's academia, but mid-career women are leaving, and more senior executive level women are leaving, and we need them at the table, right? In order to change these things and allow for more people to come to these tables.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I wanted to ask you, because I've been doing this with everyone who's come on the program. So what's on your playlist as you're making these changes to the world?
Oh, I think top of it, and it's probably a cliche, but again, as a mother of a small child, I think top of my playlist at the moment is Let It Go.
Oh,
So, Disney songs, basically. Like, I just don't care anymore. I'm not going to be the good little girl. So that's definitely on there. And the other one is, I don't know if you've seen, is it called Zootropolis or Zootopia? I think it depends on which country you're in. But the one where Shakira sings the Try Everything, that one.
oh,
And it's all about like failing and getting back up and trying again. And I think that kind of sums up a lot of the last 4 or 5 years for me, work-wise anyway. Kind of losing something that I'd fought my whole life to get, and then finding myself right back in a junior position and having to work my way up again. So I think those two, yes, the Disney songs, and yes, I'm a mother of a 4-year-old, so you can probably predict that that's what I'm going to say. But yeah.
I love that.
Aside from that, I guess, yeah, powerful voices, I think. Powerful and marginalized voices I like listening to. So somebody asked me once, if I could have the singing voice of anybody in the world, who would it be? And my answer was Whitney Houston.
Oh my gosh.
Immediately. Oh my goodness, what wouldn't I give to be able to sing like that, right? So if I'm feeling kind of down, if I put anything on by Whitney Houston, it tends to give me kind of that boost to get going.
Oh, that's amazing. We have a woman, so I do dancing for a choir that's for charity. So it's for bringing anybody in the community can sing, and then they get them on stage. And this woman
Aw.
did I Will Always Love You. Oh my goodness. She had the most amazing voice that we were all like, wait, how? Because she's so, like reserved, and introverted. And then she gets on stage and you're like, so yeah, I want to hear her do more Whitney Houston songs. It's incredible. She also did conga, everybody do the conga. Who's that? Who's the artist for that?
I don't know.
Can't remember, but also like a Latin American singer when you were saying Shakira.
Yeah.
I need to listen to that song. I haven't listened to it. So it's
It's
something.
a brilliant one.
It sounds amazing.
Like a lot of songs, I think you understand more of it when you listen to the words. The tune's very catchy, but yeah, like listening
Yeah.
to the words kind of makes you melt a little bit. Yeah.
My kid's middle name is Elsa, so they actually like
Oh,
started hating their middle name when when that movie came out. But I was like, it's an empowerment song. Like it's
it is, yeah, definitely.
maybe they'll
But
come back around.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that there was a period in France in the early 90s where like every other boy was called Kevin, basically on account of like Kevin Costner and what else was there? The Home Alone movie and so on and so forth. And so yeah, when I was teaching in France about 14 years ago or so, like every other kid was called Kevin. I realized this was a French name, but yeah, what goes around comes around.
But not because of South
Something
Park, South Park. They killed.
Possibly. I
No,
didn't consider
was
that
that
one,
Kenny? Was that
possibly.
Kenny? Not Kevin. Kenny? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
it's Kenny. I don't know about a Kevin, but I don't know.
No. Oh, it's been amazing to talk to you. And
Likewise.
yeah, I think we've done a lot of good here with bringing up these subjects. So thank you
Fingers
for
crossed.
being brave and, bringing your courageous voice to
Thank you
this.
for giving me a platform to do it, because I think that's as necessary as anything. Like having the people who want to say these things is important, but having the space in which to do it, a safe space in which to do it, is vital. So thank you for providing that.
Oh, thank you, Christy. It's been lovely. Thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, definitely. This was a really good one and such a good, I don't know, it just feels like the right time to do it as well with what's happened and, the senior leaders that we're seeing trying to get to the top and change things. So I really appreciate that we did this today. Thank you.
Pleasure.